Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
We've got returning Book Club from Hell alumnus here, Aaron Barry. I mean, this only the second time under your current name. I don't know if it's your real name or not. You've also been on under the name Jasper Ceylon. To talk about your new books, Femoid and Pound Flesh. Pound Flesh in particular, I was just blown away by. These are both really style-heavy prose pieces. Femoid's a novel, Pound Flesh is a novella from the perspective of quite poorly adjusted young women in the 2020s. Both have very similar preoccupations, this nihilism, terminal distraction, just poorly formed rage. The sort of person who will unironically identify with the Joker movie, that new one that was all a rage a few years ago, and both of which are either published or distributed by McBussy Publishing, the remarkably eye-catching logo of I'm pretty sure it's an asshole as a hamburger. A very, very detailed image as well. That certainly got my attention when I visited their website. For those listening, my energy levels will pick up during this episode. You've got Sleepy Jack this early morning, probably Sleepy Aaron, who's late at night his time. It'll be a nice, relaxed episode from that perspective. Thank you for coming on again, and thanks for these books.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
I gave my brief description of these two books, of Femoid and Pound Flesh. How would you describe them? And I say them, I'm putting them together because they do feel related. They have, like I said, similar preoccupations. The style is similar. I would say probably more refined in Pound Flesh, which makes sense because you wrote it after Femoid. How would you describe them?
Yeah, so Femoid was like a kind of prototypical version of Pound Flesh, in the sense that I was making the shift from writing poetry almost exclusively, and I really wanted to play around with the novel form and kind of nail down a style for a few different projects. So Femoid, at one point was 150,000 words, kind of like a character study of this.
Didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, I know, right? Just like way too long. But it almost sort of became a character study in a whole bunch of different styles of one disaffected, dysfunctional Femoid type character in particular. I was less focused on plot, and I really just kind of wanted to get my legs under me and figure out what a kind of compelling or fresh prose style would be, while also kind of drawing on my experience as a poet. So Femoid, in my opinion, is not perfect, but it was me experimenting with every sort of feature I could cram in there. So like representations of in this case, Crystal Cafe threads, which are essentially just 4chan threads, diversions in like fake Harlequin romance novel chapters, and there are poems in there and that show her sort of maturation as a character. So I really tried to go all out to experiment as much as I could, while also keeping it somewhat cohesive. But then Pound Flesh is much more refined in terms of the plot and the style and everything, and it's much shorter, so it kind of ended up just being a caper story with a little bit of autism sprinkled in.
Yeah. I mean, more than a little autism in the case of Pound Flesh. Like Morrow, the character whose subjectivity you're locked into is, she's got her own set of problems, put it that way. She's a pretty poorly adjusted young woman. So I heard you talking on the Getting Lit podcast, highly recommended for people who like this show and haven't heard of it, you will like Getting Lit. Go listen to that if you want to hear more Australians talking about books. I heard your appearance on that show talking about Pound Flesh, so I'll try to avoid just rehashing the same things. You were up there, although inevitably we'll cover some of the same ground because we are talking about the same books. But I was wanting to ask about writing the internet, which is something they also ask about, and which is something that pops up a lot at the moment. How do you write the internet? Should you write the internet? How do you do it well? And so on. And but both of these books are clearly, at least in some way, an attempt to acknowledge the presence of the internet in our lives, the impact it has on us. But what does it mean to write an internet novel? I can't help but feel that if one's writing today, the internet's so all-consuming that any novel being written, at least by someone in the West, is so influenced by the internet and its effect on just how we interact with the world that directly trying to write the internet is almost redundant. I mean, the internet's going to be there in the background unless you're going out of your way to write some historical piece and trying to almost cleanse your mind of that hyper-real way of viewing the world through the internet. Books that seek to be highly online, quote-unquote, oftentimes just become boring pastiches of scrolling your algorithmic news feed of choice. When I'm looking at them, I think, well, I mean, if I'm going to waste my time scrolling, I may as well just have the real thing. It's like drinking Coke and Diet Coke, or your decaf coffee and real thing, or whatever. But how did you approach it? Because I think particularly Pound Flesh is a book that does it well. That a book that is not only written, from the context of the internet, from the context of someone who is immersed in this every day, but something that also directly acknowledges the internet, but does it in a way that is actually meaningful. It's not just set dressing. It actually, the references to the internet feel load-bearing and important, and if you removed them, the book would be diminished. Or it's so present that the book would just be incoherent without it. How did you approach it? And you do also talk about why do you think it sometimes doesn't work. You don't have to name names, don't have to start any literary feuds here. And why do you think it works in Pound Flesh? So I have some of my own ideas, but let you go first.
It's quite a big topic these days, yeah. I mean, the internet novel is just a kind of inevitability, I would think. It was bound to happen. Enough people were bound to get online for this to necessitate documentation and fictionalization and all of that. So I don't hate internet novels as much as other people might. I do understand the dislike for them in the sense that they feel quite ephemeral. And because internet culture moves so quickly, it's tough to foresee any kind of internet novel really having a lasting impact when there are many of them now, and they encapsulate, in most cases, just a very brief period of time now. So you could have an internet novel about being on the internet in 2012. You could have one being in the internet in 2013. You have so many different references from that just small chunk of time that you would have ample material. But I just don't know if those have as much staying power, because it's just this sort of you're building sandcastles right by the shoreline, and it's I knew that going into Femoid in some respects, which is why I dialed it down for Pound Flesh. So where I think eventually we're going to end up with internet novels is we're hopefully going to all realize that the internet is just this unavoidable fixture that will be a background entity in almost all contemporary stories, whether we like it or not. But that will use references to it a bit more sparingly, or really just for the purposes of enhancement. Now, you can write a book like Femoid and try to just cram every single possible reference in there to show that someone is insane, as I did. But if you're trying to do more than, say, a character study, and you're trying to make sort of broader statements about social movements and blah, 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 yeah, it's just not as effective anymore. It's just been done enough that I think we get it at this point. Like in my case, I really just with Femoid in particular tried to give an encapsulation of one side of internet usage that you usually don't see in like mainstream internet novels. Like here's someone who's very clearly coming from like an alt-right type background, and she like mostly makes fun of that sometimes, but really doesn't apologize for anything or having like very extreme views. And I wasn't seeing really, other than someone like Honor Levy, but she doesn't go that far, I wasn't really seeing any female writers doing that and going that far. So I thought that would be an interesting, at least character analysis. But now that I'm done with it, I'm glad I am, because god damn, is it frustrating to write that.
Yeah. One reason why I feel like I agree with you that one of the big problems of trying to write an internet novel is that if you basically just make references to what is presently popular on the internet, just given the speed of turnover of memes, it's going to be dated, you know, far before the book is ever published, probably far before you finished even that particular draft, let alone you've gotten onto another draft. And if you're just saying these things to demonstrate that you're also someone who's highly online, which is sort of a questionable accolade, it's not going to work. It's just going to be dated so quickly. One reason why I think like you did it really well in Pound Flesh is that the dense internet slang is a very central aspect of the protagonist, Morrow. Through it we learn so much about who she is and her inner life, because it feels so much like a defense mechanism. So I mean, the dense slang is very overbearing in places, but it does seem to be calibrated. There are times when Morrow really seems to be avoiding recognizing something significant in her life, and the slang gets even denser and even more overbearing. And you can feel it as a way she's trying to shield herself from just physical reality, from the world around her. And then there are brief moments of clarity when the style almost goes away, or maybe by that point I'm so desensitized to the style that it's probably still present, but compared to the rest of the book, it seems like she's just started speaking like a normal human being. And it feels almost like she's slipped up and just unwittingly said something sincere, accidentally stopped being ironic and avoidant. And I think it's really in that specifically why it works really well, and why it avoids the pitfalls of really. Actually, not every other book about the internet that I've read. So, Agonist and my apologies for mispronouncing his name because I know I am, Udith Demeter-Goda of Hyperidian Press. It's a really great book about the internet, and he approached it from a completely different perspective to you. His approach was dramatically different, but I think his was also very successful. Maybe for similar reasons, if you go far back enough. and I guess if you squint enough, you just bear with me. Isn't that? So in Pound Flesh, the internet slang is a way to explore really just these avoidant personality traits of Morrow, and the ways in which she's just not confronting the problems in her life. And then by the end of the book, the way that she's maybe trying to confront them, but a fairly unconstructive or unhealthy way. And Agonist as well will use plenty of internet slang and stuff that is or will become dated. But it too, it's almost an exploration of ephemerality and the uses of this slang, of these memes, of this language, rather than just a way to throw these things at you as a set dressing which is going to get stale.
Yeah.
Were you writing with this in mind? Did you think for a long time about, okay, how am I going to use this particular internet slang, or have I just picked up on something that was unintentional, but I guess artistically fruitful?
No, I think you got it. Like Judith's work, I really I've been meaning to pick up his book. I did see it on
Agonist
Substack.
is very good.
Yeah, and I like his writing style generally in his pieces. I think he's quite a thoughtful contemporary writer and cultural critic. So I trust him to take a mature and sort of engaging approach to something like this at the same time. You're right, where this character of Morrow is using language, just like her friends, to avoid really addressing the problems in her life and this sort of feeling of, in her case, just complete like weightlessness in life, whereas Liliana is more focused on money, and the other two are not necessarily one way or the other, but they're just kind of caught in the middle. And something that I experimented with in Femoid was having this kind of mask of ironic linguistic expression kind of fall away, because I do think that when even these hyper online types are trying to make a serious point, they won't do so using all this slang and all that. They will try to be as formal as they can manage typically, and that's what they feel has gravitas. So yeah, Morrow does have to change how she addresses Liliana in particular when she is trying to be serious about the issues they're facing, in the same way that Savoy has to actually, at very end of Femoid, have to drop the act a little bit and try to express herself sincerely. I think that a lot of the contemporary slang, or just the internet influence on slang, is, as I've mentioned elsewhere, kind of a mask for having to sort of, let's say, confront pretty intense and then sometimes damning ideas. If you can just coach your language in ironic nonsense or you kind of just escape from it for a bit. And there's a very ubiquitous anxiety in this era among people in the age category of Morrow as well as Savoy. So language for me is a sort of mechanism by which you can, let's say, explore nuance in relation to how one would challenge these ideas or how they would cope with them. Like, I think that's just an added sort of feature of decent writing, where styles will change in relation to the seriousness of the topic and stuff like that. So that was what I was going for while doing that in particular.
Yeah, I think it worked really well. So for people picking these books up, don't be driven off by the by how overbearing the style can be initially. I think particularly in Pound Flesh, your modulation of the style was even more refined. I think also just because of the length. It's so Pound Flesh is just a novella. I got through it in one sitting because I didn't want to stop. It's short enough so you can really clearly see how you're calibrating the language for a particular effect. That does make me think of maybe a reason why Agonist works so well as an internet novel. Why particularly Pound Flesh is so successful is that. So a mistake perhaps people make in trying to write the internet is they'll latch on to the passing ephemera of, oh, well, if I reference this particular meme, then that's, now it's going to feel contemporary. It's going to feel, it's going to feel relevant to today, and of course that's going to get stale. But instead, dealing with the sensation of continuous, constantly mutating, flowing speech, just this continuous symbolic exchange between so many people at such high speeds, where you'll have memes changing and mutating and always being kind of slippery. There might be some core of meaning to them. It might be completely ephemeral. And Agonist deals with this by, I think, Udith, he just copied parts of chat rooms and Twitter and so on, just stuck it in the book, and it's just like this collage in many places of just relentless ephemeral language. And Moreau and Savoy communicate in this way. So perhaps it could be that. Perhaps it could be that. On your appearance on the Getting Lit podcast, I think it was, I forget who it was. It might have been Matt said that. In the past you had a canon to refer to. Particularly people would refer to the Bible, and those stories, they're not changing very much anymore. They've been pretty stable for a long time. Whereas today, what unchanging bedrock do we have to refer to in literature? And it could be that today it's simply that we're looking in the wrong place. So instead of looking at particular memes, particular bits of information being shared, because they're so changeable, they're so liquid, is to look in the wrong place. Perhaps we should be looking at maybe the means of distribution. So you can look at the sensation of scrolling a particular algorithmic feed that is being altered to fit your particular tastes and keep you online. So that could be one more invariant place to look. Or it could be looking at the experience of immersion in just a constantly shifting field of meaning, as spoken by, I guess, notionally, millions of different human beings. But that's not the experience you have when you're scrolling Twitter or whatever. The experience you have is one beast just screaming at you, with a cacophony of voices. Maybe that's the invariant point that we should be looking at, and that's what you and Udith have successfully been tapping into, which is why these books feel more successful as depictions of the internet. I'm not sure, but that could be it.
Yeah, I recall that conversation, and I had talked to Andrew Whitstad as well from Heavy Board about this sort of new foundation, this new referential foundation. And, if you read something like Femoid, I'm throwing a million different references at you, like every single page, basically, because this character essentially wants to feel seen and only can communicate through memes and sort of that modality of reference. And it's incredibly frustrating to read. It's just like, I wrote the fucking thing and I'm annoyed by it, but it's I was trying to almost see how annoying I could make that type of character to, if you want to view it that way, I'm almost sort of taking the piss and I'm making fun of the internet novel. while also trying to actually communicate a serious story. But the problem that I tend to have with more egregious references in contemporary lit to internet fixtures is it's kind of like when they write them into TV shows or commercials, and the actor almost puts a special emphasis on the reference itself. Like, it doesn't come very naturally as a part of the script. It's just like they really like come down hard on it, like we're playing like like if we were playing music, it'd have some accentation to really slam it down on there. So it just kind of, it seems a little bit ham-fisted typically, like the commercial where a lady walks up to the kids and goes, what the skibbity, am I right? And then the kids kind of go like, all right, ha ha ha. It's like, it's just that kind of like tier of reference.
Yep.
Because it's just like a lot of the people who write internet novels are surprisingly like in their mid to late 30s. And I get the sense that they haven't been to the same corners of the internet that I have. And maybe that's for the best, but like, I don't think that many contemporary writers have been putting in their dues in like the worst corners.
We've just got to wait for the crop of Gen Alpha novelists to right? To show us how it's really done.
Yeah, like this, 42-year-old guy is writing about using the internet. Like, yeah, they might have been using the internet in the days of like fucking Napster and LimeWire, and yeah, that's cool. But in terms of what would be a unique presentation of internet-related content, I just don't know if they have enough personal connection to it to represent it. So I hoped that with Femoid, at least, if I could do anything fresh, it would just be to highlight Crystal Cafe, which was a sort of
I visited
R9K.
On the basis of Femoid. And I just got the impression that I'm not the target audience. Fairly quickly. It's like, it's not for me.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Like Crystal Cafe is a weird website, and they're like, there, if you're a moid, as we would be called, you can't even really respond. They'll just ban you and all that sort of stuff. But there was a real tie-in with R9K for a while, and I used to go on R9K, by the way. It's not something you would talk about in public. Like, it's not a for
those blessed souls who don't know what R9K is. What's R9K?
It's Robot 9000, or at least it used to be. I think they changed the name very slightly recently, but yeah, so it was the board on 4chan that was basically for like, it was just like the incel haven, essentially. Now, I always felt like a little bit of a fraud. I'd kind of go in and check in on them. But, around the times when Joker 2019 came out and shit like that, oh man, it was popping off. 2016, holy shit. Like, I saw like such shades of humanity there that you really just would not have had access to in the regular discourse and stuff otherwise. Like, for better or worse, they would sort of throw me down in different directions. And yeah, you've got Poll and you've got all those other places, sending you down different rabbit holes. But R9K, I just found it was like so overwhelmingly pathetic that I just couldn't help but feel really bad for some of these guys. Like, those moments of genuineness where it would just be like some grainy cell phone picture of a guy walking alone in like rural America on a snowy road, and he'd be like, guys, I don't think I can do it. I think tonight's the night I kill myself type of stuff. And just the types of reactions you would get to that kind of content. And sometimes you'd save the guy, other times it seemed like there was no saving. But like, I just wasn't really seeing much of that, like the true desperation and strangeness. in the discourse elsewhere, and now we've caught up. Fine, now everyone knows about, you know, what was going on back like 8 years ago, 10 years ago on places like that. But for a while, it was kind of like that Must Secret Club type deal.
There's a particular desperation
in a weird way,
to it that
yeah,
like Wizard Chan was maybe the place where I it's just the most intense place of intense loneliness and desperation.
yeah.
I think it was on Wizard Chan they used to have section on ways to kill yourself. It was,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Some of those I mean, I guess they're probably just self-identify as incels, like those incel boards before inceldom became cool and mainstream. Yeah, there was a particular depression and desperation that you couldn't really find in too many other places. Not to that extent. And not with those, like you said, moments of true sincerity, of, I don't know if I can take it anymore. Which is a very odd experience as someone, because it's online and you can just go there. A combination of intense sincerity and the fact that you can just voyeuristically come in and gawk at these people, you know, maybe feel bad for them, but then just leave and return to your life is so jarring.
Well, yeah, because you take a piece of it with you. If you're a somewhat conscientious person, you know, and you don't just automatically turn this stuff off and, you know, go to work and do your 9 to 5 or whatever the fuck people do. Like, I was never that type. I would think about these for like days on end. And every time I went back, there would always be something going on there. And sometimes it was just complete irony, you know, like the women don't deserve anything in life, blah, 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 that kind of rhetoric. Like, you know, just like pure unadulterated misogyny. And then there would at other times be these, in between all the porn threads and the whatever else, those really like raw moments, those like the ones that deserved to be fictionalized in some capacity, or featured in some way. And so eventually all of that inspiration made it kind of into Femoid more than Pound Flesh, because it's more of a testament to not only my time on that, but my ex-girlfriend's as well. Like, so I needed to get it out of my system. Like, really.
It's more an exorcism.
Yeah, Femoid is an exorcism of like my time on 4chan and all those places. Just to say, like, hey, you know what? I was fucking there, guys. Like, I was there before all this random shit made it onto Instagram and whatever else. And I've got some anecdotes about that, because I ran into a friend I don't see too often anymore. And he's like, you know what, man? You were right. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, all that stuff you were telling me 10 years ago, like all this sort of stuff we had to sort of prepare for in terms of social shifts and what was kind of lingering beneath the surface that used to get talked about online. We all thought you were insane, but I'll be damned if it didn't come true. I'm like, well, I just tapped into it a little bit earlier on, and it drove me wild for a bit. It wasn't good psychologically a lot of the time, but it puts you in a different frame of mind. You see life and society differently when you tap into that stuff.
Now we just need large companies, and particularly advertising agencies, to take the ideological aesthetic of R9K and Wizard Chan, and now the angrier parts of X, and begin selling them to people in the same way that grunge was digested and sold to people as a consumer product, and thereby completely neutering it as a political force. That's the way the coherence of society is protected. The digestion of anything is potentially threatening, and the conversion of it into a series of advertising jingles. It's coming.
It is.
Perhaps it's already happening now, but I guarantee this stuff is going to become a series of distilled marketing images or your marketing symbols within our lifetimes, probably within the next like 5 years.
Well,
Like
yeah,
they're going to be using
really...
this stuff to sell burgers and mats for your car, headrests, headphones, whatever. It's coming.
Yeah, take your little incel to McDonald's today and get him a Chris Chan meal or something stupid.
Exactly. Well, no, like the chicken tendies advertisements write themselves. You know, has your special little man accumulated enough good boy points? Fucking come down to KFC. That's the thing for him.
You know what? I actually want to say they did a good boy points ad at some point. I could be totally wrong, but I want to say they did do that.
You know, I've damaged my brain enough, and probably at a young enough age, that when I see a Great British Pounds (GBP), I first think of good boy points before I think of Great British Pounds. And by the standards of like the internet of these spaces, I'm geriatric. Just imagine the sort of psychological damage done to people younger and more impressionable than me.
Yeah, because you know we got to live without it for a bit. It wasn't all consuming. At least I'm assuming for you in high school, like you weren't hanging out on R9K and Pole and all that stuff. Like,
no, I was too well adjusted in high school. I didn't develop that. It's like when you drive past a car crash, you can't help but look. That morbid curiosity. I hadn't quite developed that with respect to the internet in high school. That came a bit later of realizing you just go on these sorts of forums and see people. I mean, like it's vampiric. You're basically getting some sort of, if not entertainment, then some sort of thrill, maybe it's jouissance, from looking at someone's misery. It's not a it's not a good thing to be doing. But that car crash, that train wreck watching feeling was not something I realised I could indulge in on the internet until I was maybe 19 or 20.
Right. Well,
and by that time I already had a long-term girlfriend, and I think that probably like was ballast.
Yeah, the thing is, I got a lot to say on all this too, and especially in relation to women.
I mean, yeah,
like,
you wrote 2 books on it. Like, I expect you have a lot to say on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm really glad I found all this stuff before the farce era of all this. You know, I hate the saying, but people overquote it, but things will occur first as tragedy and then as farce. We aren't
Shout
quite
out to Karl Marx, the first observer of R9K.
I loved that they hated Marx on there too. Actually, that was quite funny. There was just this ever-present disdain for Marx, despite the fact that their lives had been going horribly and all this sort of stuff. Like most of them were determined to not let Marx's influence ruin their lives any further. But it's that kind of like sort of eccentricity that really drove me to go back to places like that. They're just like, there were sticking points that like you didn't need to like die on this hill, but they just would over and over. Like, I mean, like glorious displays to each other of which hills they were willing to die on. So I'm drawn still to those kinds of manic displays, but you do feel a little bit vampiric. I was speaking to someone recently about this. She couldn't understand why I bothered to catalog the type of stuff that I do typically in my work. She's like, I just don't know why you would associate with the people that you have and that you continue to. It's without giving too much away, like in my own personal life, like I've lived a lot of just the retardation encapsulated in my work, but and just so much more that I haven't even bothered to find the time to write about. Everything from like, you know, street racing phase to, you know, dating multiple girls at once to just doing whatever it was that seemed like kind of out there or weird or perhaps like some sort of avenue to discoveries that few members of the public would allow themselves to kind of endeavor after. I would kind of go in that direction, save for, you know, starting a drug habit or whatever it was. That was never my deal. But, and if you don't have some outlet like this, if you don't have some creative outlet for it, it really just is a detriment to you after a while. I would not be doing a lot of this sort of stuff if I didn't have some fixed purpose in mind, because you are then, if you're even halfway, you know, sympathetic to these types or empathetic, depending on your experiences, like you're taking on so much heavy content and you're taking on such psychological malaise that you're bound to hurt yourself with it. I'm very fortunate that I do stuff with this content. Otherwise, I would probably try to stay away from it. So I understand why people do. Or they might have a passing curiosity and then just move on.
Yeah, but it's sort of hard to tell how ubiquitous the drive to go on the internet and just find something that's, I guess, massively limbically stimulating is, you know, to go on and try to track down war footage, cartel executions, or even just observe people screaming at each other angrily, which you can basically find on anywhere where people can use language to communicate with one another on the internet, particularly in an asynchronous way, because I think people are just much more willing to. I mean, this is far from a novel insight. People are much more willing to be just incredibly rude to one another in text, even as compared to like if you have to record yourself speaking, or if you have to listen to someone, like a recording of someone shouting at you. But I suspect it's fairly common, and there is some strange belief, and I mean, I used to have this too, that in interacting with these things, one is sort of like a mirror in that, you know, these things can be reflected. You can see them, but you're also not changed by them. You know, like a mirror, once you remove the thing it is reflecting, it's no longer reflected, and all those things are washed away. Whereas I think people retain psychological residues of these things to a far greater extent than maybe they want to acknowledge. I mean, logging on online, I mean, you look at the most egregious examples of people just watching videos of other people getting killed in various wars, you know, war becoming just another avenue for audio-visual consumption. That's having some real psychological effects. You're not just a passive observer there. I guess the vampiric analogy grows stronger here in that, like, you really are absorbing these things. They are becoming part of you. You might not be able to consciously point at what part of you is altered or broken by them, but it's having an effect.
Oh, undoubtedly, yeah. The average person's psychological makeup is a curiosity at this point.
Yeah.
Even the average person's. I mean, as writers, we spend almost all of our time observing people and just trying to figure out. We're essentially amateur psychologists, if you want to put it that way, in the sense that most of what we do is diagnostic. We may not have the answers as to how to address some of this stuff. Maybe the better ones among us can actually kind of puzzle their way intuitively to how to get out of these issues. But the bulk of what we do at the very least is diagnostic. And so you're paying attention to this stuff at all times, and you're seeing how even 50-year-olds on Facebook are getting reels about, you know, Ukrainian drones blowing people up and all this sort of shit, and you just like, it's an all-out affront on the senses to it's like bewildering. I don't know.
When you just say it out loud, it is It is so incredibly perverse. You I mean, talking about diagnosis is
what the fuck?
Is like I think
average
it's a good way
50-year-old.
to regard it. Sorry, go on.
No, it's all right, but yeah, like it's just I don't think we need this much stimulation. Obviously, that's not a new thought in any capacity, but like the 50-year-old. Yeah, it does. Like the 50-year-old or even the 60-year-old or, my Nana or something, she does not need this kind of content coming her way, She thinks Facebook is the internet, right? And so, like, I haven't been able to teach her to actually, use the whole part of the internet. But, she's getting stuff like this. I'm like, I'm not going to write about, a close to 90-year-old woman engaging with this sort of stuff unless it's like, a minor character in a short story. But, I don't know how much more of this we can take, is my grave concern, I suppose, for the masses.
It is fascinating when you consider, from a psychological perspective, the what particularly sites like Twitter or Facebook, Instagram are doing. I mean, Substack does it well. It's just slightly different. Just the way that they tailor content to you. Say if you're scrolling and you pause slightly because I don't know you're on Twitter and there's just like a naked woman has appeared, and it's like as a mammal, like you can't help but be momentarily distracted by it. Like it's going to get your attention. And these sorts of sites, I mean, as everyone knows, like those slips of yours when you demonstrate the chinks in your psychological armor are going to be weaponized and used against you to steal more of your attention. But in doing so, we are slowly actually we're building up a map of the collective unconscious. Your personal timeline, your personal recommendation algorithm is in some ways a representation of your unconscious desires. When people go online and they come across, say on their Twitter timeline is just full of stuff that makes them furious. In many ways, it is like a gorilla attacking its reflection in a mirror. This is to a large extent just maybe you can think of it as shadow work. This is you. This is some aspect of you that you are responding to. It maybe so much of what is so psychologically damaging about it is it makes the unconscious too explicit. we just have too clear a view of our unconscious desires, and it's driving our egos absolutely insane. But,
I'll agree with you on that, where your algorithm gets tuned to your desires and stuff for a reason. They figure out pretty quickly what you want, and then it becomes a representation, whether you're willing to recognize it or not. It becomes a representation of you. But I think they play a game with you where they zero in on what you reasonably would like. And again, this is not a novel observation, but then they just dial it up a little bit. That's where the insanity comes in. Like that's where the insanity. Like I would love to see thirst trap stuff. I'm not going to pretend like I don't like seeing hot women on my Instagram or whatever, right? But I can hit not interested 100 times, and I'll still need to do it 100 more because it's going to continue to try to give that to me. And I don't even know how many times I've tried to cleanse my algorithm of stuff like that, but it just keeps coming back. They think I want those goth baddies, and like, yes, maybe I do, but like in real life,
beyond the pleasure principle. Your desire is being exhausted. The drive still first.
Yeah, so like it's they do play this little game with you where they just keep trying to feed it to you, even if you fight back against them. They know you want it, and then they're going to try to really almost exert a kind of psychological pressure on you with it, where I think we then lapse into dangerous territory of, kind of giving an alcoholic, just one or two drinks to pick him up.
Yeah, it's something to get you going in the morning.
Yeah, like that's what they're trying to do with this stuff. And I think writers are, zeroing in on that to some respects, but it's a dangerous little game we're playing.
Yeah, and I'm actually cautiously optimistic about the future. I think eventually we will just develop cultural strategies for dealing with these sorts of things, as we have with alcohol, where alcohol remains an addictive substance, but you look at the social forms that have been built up around it in cultures which have been exposed to alcohol for a long time, and it's actually a very, very socially regulated drug to interact with. And you're probably just going to get this eventually with algorithmic social media, where, say, like being an alcoholic, like waking up and having a beer is like that's just regarded as not something you want to do. It's very low status. And you laugh, but in a completely unregulated environment, like plenty of people would do that. And you do see it with, with cultures that had no exposure to alcohol that then like one day to the next got beer. Say like with Australian Aboriginals, like when like British settlers came, like they brought with them alcohol because Europeans love drinking. And it's like you just had this collection of cultures which had no cultural safeguards and like how to deal with this stuff, and it just ripped through them.
Right.
And that's kind of what's happening to us right now. We've been exposed to extremely addictive substances, and we have no cultural strategies for dealing with them. I suspect eventually we will just view excessive social media use as like being an alcoholic. It's you roll out of bed, you open up Instagram, people will be like, "What the fuck's wrong with you? Don't do that." We're still in that teething period where we're not protected from our desires by culture.
That's a good point. I think, those morning Instagram scrolls are really just going to be the equivalent of, one...
Brekkie beers.
Yeah, one legal serving. And it's... I think you're right where... and the prevalence of the internet novel is also a symptom of this. There's been such an explosion in general use, and especially with the implementation of Reels, a few years back there, like that's where things really hit like the fucking hyperdrive. So we're still actually in, I wouldn't say a nascent state, but we're almost kind of at like the intermediate level with our understanding of this, where people are actually finally starting to like curtail their real exposure and stuff. Where even my friends now, like close friends that I've been on, the socials with forever, they're just not going to go on much anymore. And I'm like, you know what, man, good for you. Get out of this fucking place, man. Like, I can't send you any more car crash reels. Like, I don't want to do it. And it's, but I'm really happy to see that, actually, because, unfortunately for writers, you have to stay, especially if you're, more of like a chronicler of this kind of stuff, you have to stay dialed into a certain respect. But my God, am I looking forward to the day where I just simply don't have to anymore.
When it could be like when you have pictures of people handing out cigarettes in hospitals, and you laugh at it because you think, oh, how could they be so stupid? You probably will just have an equivalent of that, in however many years. I won't put a firm number on it because I don't know how long this is going to take to develop. But I suspect people are going to look at the 2020s, or the period from maybe 2010 to 20 whatever, peak social media as the equivalent of people having like lead piping or smoking in hospital or asbestos in everything, and being like, yeah, man, you were you were stupid. I mean, I guess in the case of asbestos and lead piping, like we genuinely didn't know that it was really bad for you. In the case of smoking, it's just, I mean, inhaling smoke is just, no one has ever thought that was a good idea. We just convinced ourselves it was because nicotine feels good. I guess if you do it enough. Yeah. One thing
And it does.
Fortunately, I've avoided that in the same way that I just deleted my social media before the short form video content era. So I haven't interacted with that, and I don't intend to. I use Twitter for this podcast. I'll use Substack for this podcast, but I don't interact with the short form media stuff. It just seems so bad for you. They're genuinely toxic.
Yeah, I want to say it has impacted my life for the worse. I mean, the only interesting aspect for me as a creative and otherwise is, I know you've read some Nick Land recently and all of that sort of stuff. You know, if you're on the accelerationist bandwagon, as some people might be, you almost want Reels to proliferate, because it's going to, like, that marked such a massive shift in, like, our collective attention spans and stuff like that. Like, that is immanentizing the eschaton, basically. Like, it's really...
that is Neo China arriving from the future. Yes. The day when we can have Instagram Reels of, I don't know, some like 17-year-old Russian conscript having a grenade dropped on his head is that is the day that Neo China truly arrives from the future.
We've already got it. I don't know how to tell you this, brother. We've got that, and we've got a lot worse.
It has arrived. Yeah.
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 I mean,
I think it's an unambiguously good thing that I'm not up to date with this. I never intend to be up to date with it when it comes to the short form video content economy. One thing that I did really notice.
Yeah, good call.
In Poundflesh particularly, and just more broadly, is the generational narcissism. That the characters in Poundflesh are all 19, I'm pretty sure, and they're convinced that they're obsolete. It's all about Gen Alpha now, and they're over the hill. Even though the age of 19 is just comically young. I mean, you're more or less a child with an adult body. I mean, I don't feel like I finished developing till I was maybe 27 or 28.
Right.
Where do you think almost like the Pokemon trainer approach to generations came from? It's like people seem to have incredibly rigid ideas about what it means to belong to a generation. You know, if you were born 3 years apart, so like my brother, for example, is like old Gen Z. Like, he's right at the start of Gen Z. And if you were to believe, I guess, like the internet zeitgeist, you would think that he and I are just categorically different. There's just a fundamental trench of misunderstanding lying between us, whereas I, funnily enough, don't actually think that's the case. Where do you think this is coming from? Because it only seems to be getting stronger, and it is something that has popped up in a bunch of internet novels that I've read or started and not finished more recently, and it's often something that makes me take the author a lot less seriously when they've got too much of that. Well, a millennial is a particular type of Pokemon, Gen X is another type, a Gen Alpha is another type, and they're all just fundamentally different. Never the two shall meet, and so on. Where do you think this is coming from? Because you definitely have it in Poundflesh, but it's used to artistic effect. It's used to examine things rather than just almost stated as a law of nature.
Yeah, I really wanted to portray these characters as being misguided, of course, in terms of their view of their own shelf life, and just perhaps not understanding that where we're at in the economic fall is not as dire as it might seem. Like, it's not good. Like, believe me, I spent entirely too much time observing and cataloging the various sort of financial failings of in my case my country, but also just globally and in the Western world, our institutions, like just the sheer depth of the kind of subterfuge that's taken place behind the scenes, and then just the overt disdain for the citizenry in some cases on financial grounds has been staggering. So I have no illusions when it comes to how banking institutions operate, how governments the sort of essentially co-sign a lot of the worst decisions that they make. And I wanted to add a little bit of that in there, where you can try to quote unquote red pill people very subtly, but the effect on the average 19-year-old, they hear all of this stuff, they see it on social media now, they see reels about the Federal Reserve, they see reels about fractional reserve banking, all this sort of crazy shit,
fractional
right? That they shouldn't really have to
explained in a short form media post.
It's right, they're seeing this kind of stuff, It's fucking diabolical. I mean, you got people recommending a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind by Goodson in a 10-second clip to these fucking people. So it's just, I would imagine, extremely overwhelming in the same way that it is for even people in my cohort. So I think I wanted to start with characters who mistakenly believed that their lives were essentially over in some capacity, despite the fact that they had a lot to look forward to, even during our sort of general downturn. Because too many people really just rush into whatever sort of expedient comes up. They might go into, OnlyFans type stuff. They might just try to leave the country as soon as possible. They might make really rash decisions, as these four do. And I don't want...
Is an understatement.
They make some very poor decisions, right? And so I don't want people to feel that sense of imminent doom at all times. But the more of these younger types that I talk to, even students of mine will sort of feel that way. I've got, not to dox myself or anything, but I've dealt with students who are 12 years old and they're talking to me about financial matters. They're like, oh, in order to make money, I'm going to have to invest in crypto. And I've already got my parents set me up with this sort of thing. And I'm going to try to rug pull someone. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? That's funny, but also dude, you're 12. You still don't know how to use commas properly. Let's just work on this first, okay? Then you can work on rug pulling someone with whatever the fuck coin.
Yeah.
I want people to be financially literate, of course, but if you would believe a lot of the current cultural forces, then you need to be gambling with your money all the time in stocks. You need to be doing all this other crazy shit. And it's just too much for some people. They can't calm down. It ruins their life choices. It ruins relationships. Fuck, money's ruined tons of my relationships too. So that's kind of where I wanted to take this book. But in terms of the broader social influences, it would take me quite a while, I guess, to run down all of those as to why we view money this way, but why we even view generations as being so discrete. I mean, I think really too much of it is just buying into the monolith. And the monolith really wants to separate you into different categories. It wants to put you into as many as possible. if you're more of a doomer and you hate advertisers and capitalists and stuff, you say, well, that's because they want to be able to have as much information about you as possible, and they want to be able to market to you as effectively as possible. But I think just generally, there's this real sort of shearing off taking place where they just want to they want to put all the focus on the next generation, load them up with as much of this nonsense as possible, like really bloat their egos, tell them anything's possible in the world, all this sort of shit. And as soon as, you know, they're not living up to the sort of standard or whatever, it's just, okay, let's try again with the next one. And then, you know, it's Gen Alpha, where they're already talking about what characterizes Gen Alpha, and she's like, who gives a shit? They don't even know. They still
fucking children. Let's work on the developmental milestones first. you can ascribe.
They're watching their Mr. Beast videos, and they're watching their Mr. Beast, and they're eating their lunch leaves or whatever the fuck. They still don't know. Yeah, they don't even have hair on their chests or anything like that. Like, how the fuck do they know what they're gonna offer together?
It is. I guess this ties back to the, what we were talking about earlier with incel aesthetics probably becoming an advertising. Becoming an advertising commodity eventually as a way to just completely diffuse any sort of potential social unrest from them, or any meaningful challenge of instability. And I guess from what you've been saying about short video content, particularly, it sounds like the most wonderful informational castration of anyone. I mean, it's something like you saying, short content about fractional reserve banking and so on. I mean, it's such an excellent combination of offering someone a very, very complicated topic, which if they were willing to apply themselves to apply attention to for a sustained period, might lead to instability, might lead to something dangerous happening. But it's at the same time, they're loaded up with resentment and have their ability to act on that resentment in any way but the most self-destructive removed, because their attention span is shot to pieces, thereby rendering them impotent, unwilling to do anything except further anaesthetize themselves with consumer products and with more capital C content. It really feels like gelding. They're just castrated, made completely impotent.
Yeah, I do agree, because the thing that you notice too is you can almost spot someone who has gotten their talking points from reels. Because let's say we're on the subject of fractional reserve banking or something like that, they'll know they've linked an instinct to this topic. They feel that something is wrong there, and they've been very briefly explained the reasons why. But then when they have to go out into the public and then share this with other people, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, because I mean, in this case, fractional reserve banking is disastrous. But you can almost spot someone like that because they don't have the requisite, references lined up. They might not be able to point you in the right directions. They can just say, well, I saw this video and this guy was saying, and any sort of like further level of scrutiny usually just leads them to sort of crumble and then resort to, emotional outbursts. They get angry over these things because they feel like you should immediately apprehend the same sort of, I guess, emotionality underlying this, and you should also have the same instinct, and you should recognize that this is the problem in the way that they did. So it's really kind of undermining thoughtful discourse or nuanced discourse, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, the reason why so much, at least democratic politics, feels like increasingly arguments between just semi-literate people. It almost feels like if you just gave the medieval peasantry smartphones, it would be something similar to this. Like you said, it's I guess it's, in a what is conveyed in a short form video. You can't convey much semantic information or specific information. What you can do is evoke strong emotions. Yeah, so when you say, they tend to just get angry, and that you don't immediately apprehend the importance, like the emotional resonance of this topic, I guess that's because they've only ever interacted with the emotional resonance of this topic. They've interacted with something which evokes strong emotions and then will attach some, I guess, advertising label to it, as, fractional reserve banking, and then, we're going to stir up some strong feelings in you to associate with that. And it doesn't progress beyond that.
There are really two ways to sort of predict what's going to come with this. I would hope that at least even my sort of what I've observed in my personal circles will apply to more people coming up, where the people just decide, well, I'm going to check out, I'm gonna get off this platform. I've got a fiance now or whatever it is. Like, I don't want to fuck this up by spending 6 hours a day watching reels about banking and all this other sort of stuff. Like, I want to drive her fucking crazy. Watching these reels about I don't know, the capitalist overthrow of Nauru or whatever the fuck, Nauru. Like
shout out to Australia.
That was the island where they just mined it to fucking hell, right?
Yeah,
they created a bunch of and then you could create bank accounts and stuff like that, kind of like in the Cayman Islands. For a little while, you could launder money through there and whatever the fuck, but now it's just decimated, right? So, you could watch reels about that sort of stuff, or you could watch reels about the Gaza genocide and drive yourself absolutely mental. But I really do hope that people will spend just less time for a while on these platforms, and that it might not de-radicalize them. I don't actually care if people are radicalized or not too much. It makes things kind of fun, but I don't think the average person is equipped to deal with this if they don't have an outlet for it, like you or I might. And that's where it gets.
I don't think anyone is equipped to deal with it. I just don't think this is good for anyone. I think the the good thing to do for any human being is not to use it. I think of it in the same way as smoking. It's actually just the best thing to do is not to do it. If you like it, that's good. You just have to acknowledge that this is actually harmful.
Statistically speaking, it is. The studies I'm sure you've seen on reel watching and stuff actually equate it to drinking alcohol, and it causes demonstrable brain damage. You could put a legal disclaimer on it at this point. I think we have enough
parts of your brain.
Yeah, and I just, the only reason I really I'm still sort of immersed in that in any degree really is just to inform my written work. I would probably be off social media entirely. I don't really like it. I could rant to you for days about the Twitter sphere, as gay a term as that is. Just every time I go on there and I see I'm not trying to make any enemies here, but the non-stop deluge of quirky takes and hot takes and one-off observations that are obviously just by definition the height of subjectivity on a very minor topic. They're funny, sure. I don't begrudge people offering these, but it's no, you hit a point of saturation with this stuff in social media in particular. So I do think I hope we will see a tapering off of very nearly all forms of it. save for those who need to maintain it just to sort of promote things or have like a professional presence. But I don't know, much to be said.
I mean, much of it also does seem to be the filling of a void, because it's chicken and egg, because there does seem to be a more and more general sense of nihilistic boredom, and I suppose there are multiple ways to respond to that, but one is anesthesia, and just doom scrolling is like it's an effective form of existential anesthesia. I mean, you can momentarily stop being quite as terrified if you do that. And that nihilism is something that does come up in both these books of yours. I mean, in Pound Flesh, for example, there's it talks about this. I suspect it's a growing trend of spectacular violence, and when I say spectacular, I mean like violence first and foremost as spectacle. So I mean, I don't want to spoil parts of the book, although it is in the blurb of the book, and I kind of wish it weren't, because I read Pound Flesh without having read the blurb of it. So there's an event around the middle of the book that took me by surprise, which I hope other readers get to experience too. But there's an act of violence that the character who commits it just doesn't seem to understand, like is just unaware of why it happened. Like it just happens. And so much of the book the latter half of the book seems to be this character almost just trying to find reasons for why this happened, and slowly begins to focus on what ultimately feel like fairly hollow and narcissistic reasons masquerading as politics, which is why I feel like the end of the book is pretty grim. There's not an escape from this intense narcissistic egoism and nihilism. But there do seem to be these acts of violence, particularly in North America, where it almost feels like there's a background of nihilism, of nothing, and whether conscious or unconscious belief that if a sufficiently extreme act is committed, a sufficiently senseless act of violence, perhaps that very intensity will create its own meaning. Perhaps that will will into existence something that means something. And I felt like, whether you intended it to be or not, Pound Flesh particularly is a really interesting exploration of that tendency, which I suspect is only going to become more pronounced. What did you mean this to be the case?
I'm really glad you picked up on that, actually, because when I was starting this out, and it is noted in the promotion of this that at least spiritually, this was meant to tie into Camus' The Stranger, because I read that when I was about 19, and I fucking hated Meursault. Like, really, just as a character, he bugged me to no end. And I remember talking to my boss about it. Like, she would ask me what books I was reading at the time, because I told her I wanted to be a writer eventually and stuff, and she was actually quite encouraging. So I'd talk to her about these things. I remember going in, I'm like, you know what, so-and-so, I read this book over the weekend, and I fucking hated it. Like, I really, like, just the sort of just, like, anesthetized dreariness of it just really didn't sit with me very well. And she's like, oh, that's quite concerning. I'm like, yeah, don't read it. But, reflecting on it later in life, it took on a different meaning for me, where I wanted to see what a character like Meursault would be like, in a different body, let's say, and under different circumstances. But what would a Meursaultian character do in today's world? Like, how would he get to that point of killing the random Middle Eastern man on the beach, the random Algerian, like. And so that was kind of the genesis of this. How can I get, one of these characters to a point of violence without just making it hokey or whatever? Like, there has to be a sort of philosophical component to this to match that. Now, I know it is a little bit, perhaps gauche to harken back to books like that with your own writing. So I wanted it to feel different enough that it wouldn't, you wouldn't accuse me of being some copycat of Camus, because, he's better than I am. So it's, you don't want to do that to yourself, right? I quite like Camus' body of work, but I guess I had seen things like, just various acts of violence in public. The Mangione stuff hadn't happened until I'd started writing the book. It was about half of the way through the first draft. I'm like, oh shit, here's another example. But that's why I threw in like a little bit of a reference to him there in a jokey way. But that might be a great symbol of what you just picked up on, where there's this idea that he's fighting back against, the system and all of that. Perhaps in his case he was. I know a bunch of people said, oh, well, he was an asset for this or that agency and blah, blah, blah. Who knows? But he sort of, in the public perceiving that he had a righteous purpose going up against, this insurance company, they were just all for it. They just like, he's got a fan club, all this kind of crazy shit. And I thought, well, this is a really sort of symptomatic kind of reaction. And even the people who sort of kill or damage things without a purpose like that, they don't have a fucked up back and get an insurance claim denied or something like that. Like, even they'll get GoFundMes and stuff. Like, random truck drivers who accidentally kill families on the highway get GoFundMes. Everyone ends up finding supporters now. And there's a real fascination in the public realm with just any display of violence. If you happen to have some sort of narrative, like a Mangione type, you're over the moon. Like, you're going to be a rock star. But you can even achieve a degree of recognition having absolutely no demonstrable purpose. Like, I've seen it so many times.
Even the narrative thing is like with Mangione. You don't need a narrative. You just need a few attractors for almost internet Chinese whispers to assemble around you a narrative. I mean, would anyone pay nearly as much attention to Mangione if he weren't handsome? Like, absolutely not. Like,
right.
that is so much more important than any ideological justification he may have placed upon this act of violence post hoc.
Sure.
Because, his manifesto, quote unquote, was dog shit. Like, there's nothing in there. Like, we're not dealing with Ted Kaczynski here at all. And even then, his manifesto, like, you can poke a bunch of holes in it if you want. I really think, like, the cinematic aspect of it, the omnipresence of the camera, the fact that it seems fairly ubiquitous, and I do this too, I don't exempt myself, where when you imagine doing something, you imagine yourself as being filmed, you imagine yourself from without, how one might appear doing something. I think that that sensation probably explains far more of, say, the Mangione story and any other act of spectacular violence better than any ideology. It's the
right.
self-assembly of narrative through the million voices of the internet is such a significant component of this, and you have that really strongly in Pound Flesh. Like, that happens around Morrow as she's fleeing to Mexico, which is something I really liked about it.
Yeah, I thought, how would something like her case involving, a relatively high-profile person, how would it be perceived by your average Instagram types and stuff now, especially in the wake of Mangione-style, acts of violence against, quote-unquote notable figures. And so, I was drawing on a little bit of the Mangione stuff, as well as just other instances of, like, kind of cruel and just purposeless violence that I'd seen sensationalized. And not to give too much of the book away, but I really do think you hit the nail on the head a bit with that there, and this sort of like self-assembly taking place, or even just people out there who will assemble the narrative for you. You just have to show that act of quote unquote courage, and they'll find something to latch onto, and they'll do your work for you. That's more the Morrow experience, where I've noticed, not to go on too much of a kind of tangent here, but I've noticed, especially with the younger content creators, there's a real sense that you have to go around and prove that you're not an NPC. That's the...
Yeah.
You've probably seen it,
that's
right?
like it's obligatory non-conformity. It's become its own demand.
Right, and so this like very ever-present, really kind of pressure to prove that you're not some sort of programmable, background fixture who eats the slop and blah blah blah. Like, it's a real thing among the younger generations right now, or at least the social media inclined. But one of the manifestations of this is people going around just kind of being like nuisances. Like there's this idea that if you just inconvenience other people, you are proving that you can't be controlled, where I find that a rather shallow demonstration of your non-programmability. And if enough people do it, actually, then by your logic, you kind of just have to go back to the inverse, and you have to be nice to people in public. Like it's just like this contrarianist approach, but it's extremely shallow. And I would see reels of people like just getting into an elevator and just like yelling at the top of their lungs and laughing and like, ha ha ha, I'm the Joker, baby, like, ha ha, like, this type of superficial self-demonstration I've seen is a very big psychological fixture for people who would hope to be their own person, or would hope to garner attention from the public, or they feel like they have something to prove. To some extent, the four of these, specifically Morrow, these characters in the book, kind of fall prey to that idea, or you could see them aligning with that psychologically. That's not to denounce them as characters or anything like that, but I've seen so much of that content, and I really do worry for those nuisance streamers and stuff who are now getting jailed and shit like that. There's a higher form of demonstrating that you're not an NPC, and it's sort of like stopping at the first waypoint on the ascent of some sort of mountain versus going to the very top. You're just gonna sort of take the easy way out, take a few pictures, you got a little bit of a scene there, and then you'll go back down. But those of us who actually care to make meaningful statements and to improve humanity, hopefully, keep going, and we wait, and we hold all of our ammo until the right moment. And that's essentially one of the sort of driving forces behind a book like this, for me anyway.
The nuisance streamer phenomenon is, it's something I was peripherally aware of, because I heard of there was some guy who got arrested in Japan because he was just so incredibly annoying. Or maybe it was Korea. I think it was a guy going
Johnny
around
Somali?
like, yeah, that's it. And he was going around pissing people off.
Fucking
Especially
Johnny Somali.
doing it in a place like Korea is just wild because like almost all the men there are military trained. Like if you just want to pick a place where an average dude on the street is going to stomp on your head, it's like, why are you doing it in Korea of all places? It's like that is the last place I would want to be pissing off just random people. But at least with the inconvenience thing, to me that doesn't feel it doesn't feel like a categorically new thing. Perhaps I'm sure it's exaggerated and emphasized by the internet, because to me it feels like, I mean, in childhood to adolescence to adulthood, I mean, everyone has a big other or a collection of big others whose desire is their own, whose demands they internalize and whom they, despite its insubstantiality, try to please. You know, as a child, it's often your parents. You know, your parents are the lawgivers. You're trying to impress them. You're trying to please them. And in adolescence, what we describe as adolescent rebelliousness is really rebelliousness against their old big other, because they're now taking many more cues from their social peers, and the acting out, quote unquote, or rebelliousness of them is really demonstrations of loyalty and conformity to a new source of authority. And the inconvenience streamers, just, they feel like that to me. It feels intensely adolescent. And when someone's 16 or something like that, I'm fairly sympathetic. I mean, it's a stage of life, at least in our society. And yes, it's irritating and it's inconvenient, but I won't begrudge them, those formative experiences that, let's say I had, I was the dickhead when I was 15 as well. Where I suspect things are different is that I will meet 25-year-olds who behave like this, and you think, listen, mate, you're an adult, fucking behave like one. If you want to behave like a child, I'll treat you like a child. When you have a grown man or a grown woman behaving in this way and expecting you to be impressed, it's like, we'll just grow up. Yeah. But also I guess it's a phenomenon of interpassivity, where maybe instead of partaking in these sorts of demonstrations of loyalty to your new source of authority as a teenager, instead you watch audiovisual representations of someone else doing it instead of you, which is perverse, but apparently common. And then just all the fact that the internet feels like more than anything, an adolescent place. It's why, despite the fact that you have people now in their 40s who are very, very comfortable online, have spent most of their lives online, but why people still think of the internet as a place for young people is I think the internet just encourages adolescent behaviour. And so if you're a sufficiently online person, even if you are temporally 45, if you spend enough time online, I feel like you're spiritually still a 14-year-old. Anyway, I agree with that's what you were saying about that strange phenomenon of inconvenience streamers as sort of older people.
They're an interesting breed, and I am in agreement with what you're saying on the matter too, where you can't help but really feel a sense of pity for 30-year-old man or something who goes around trying to just sort of steal restaurant signs and in the case of Vitaly in the Philippines, just steal people's hats and stuff, and now he's been imprisoned for however many years. That is another reason why I just eventually want to not have to spend as much time online. It's a very adolescent place, and it keeps you in touch with what's coming up and what the next sort of spirit is, so to speak. But really, that's one of the only good sides at this point. So the reason why I was able to arrive at a book like Pound Flesh was because of my continued presence online. But you only need to do that a few times in your career, hopefully, before you move on to greener pastures and you just sort of mature as an artist and write about what is relevant to you in your different sort of life stages. But yeah, the nuisance streamers, I could go on about those guys for a while, and I think the important thing to because maybe I was a nuisance as you were, back in the day. I do strongly actually encourage people to experiment with rebellious stages, because you discover what you're comfortable with and how much sort of risk you can take socially, and whether or not you can handle people being mad at you and all this sort of stuff. But the main area in which these types go wrong is they either don't know why they're doing it, or they don't realize that it ought to be directed. These sorts of impulses, like let's say you're noticing that your purchasing power is going down year by year, and you notice that your politicians are importing, all types of different people who may or may not be affecting the job market, the housing market, blah, 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 whatever it is. If you go around to your average citizen then, like, you're at a pharmacy and you just decide to steal some vitamin C tablets, you're not really hitting them where it hurts.
It's a mortal blow against your enemies. Those vitamin C tablets were the only thing allowing them to maintain their power over you.
Yeah, like you steal some hair dye or some shit, or you like graffiti some sign. Yeah, if it's like a multinational corporation, I guess you are technically inconveniencing them in the most minor of ways, or the franchise owner for that location is going to take a temporary hit. But you ought to direct that rebellious spirit toward more constructive avenues. It really depends how far you want to go and what you're willing to risk. You can write books, of course, as I've done. You can start channels, and you can try to inform people, hopefully not in the form of just tiny reels. You can do a lot with this. And you can live with that rebellious spirit, because to submit to a state that you've identified is actively working against you in some cases is not actually what some people want to do, and it's not what they should have to do. So it's really just about finding the right kind of balance, not being a dickhead about it, not being foaming at the mouth in public trying to explain fractional reserve banking to anyone who will listen. But like, they need to find the right enemy and act accordingly, let's say.
Yeah, and I guess it's also just a fundamentally different approach, in that almost all of it, you consider what is the object of certain behaviours, and things on social media. I mean, the object is ultimately entertainment. Like it's to capture attention, and in certain stages. So okay, I mean, I mentioned the Unabomber. Would anyone really have paid attention to his manifesto? Like, if he didn't try to get attention with acts of spectacular violence, probably far fewer. I mean, I doubt I'd have heard of him, but
right.
That it was. I mean, these were acts, far beyond those of any nuisance streamer, intended to make people aware of some body of work that he wanted to put into the public consciousness. Whereas I feel like so-called rebellion now, at least the type you see on social media, is for attention, and then it stops there. Like I only want to produce a spectacle, and that's it. And it's not only is it an ineffective strategy to effect change, it simply reinforces the power of of whatever is making that person feel bad at the moment. If they're feeling nihilistic or hopeless or bored, terrified, or like they're purchasing power, slipping away, and simply contributing to the spectacle only deepens that.
Right. And there's a superficiality to it, and you almost end up with a saturation of just, general nuisances and, kind of like I don't know. Because, if you get like 100 nuisances in a room together, what's going to happen if they don't have a proper vision of what's working against them, and they haven't even, in some cases, let's say half of them haven't even identified what they want to change. They're just going to end up giving each other wedgies and, I don't know, like kicking each other in the nuts. Like, what are we going to do with that type of person long term?
So, which is, I mean, if they insist on behaving like children, I suppose the adults will continue to make decisions on their behalf, and they will continue to be dictated to. That's
the unfortunate reality of it. I want them to wake up. I want them to find the right target, so to speak, not to, incite any riots or anything. But if you actually feel that there's something going wrong with society, or that there's something in your life in particular that isn't going well, you don't need to demonstrate your NPC-ness in that way. And the characters in the novel kind of, really just show that, they could have done so many other things with their lives if they had had a bit more patience. But at the same time, I don't want to, without giving it away, I don't want to completely disavow a character like Morrow. Because throwing that type of person out wholesale is not the solution either. Locking up all the nuisance streamers temporarily would be a nice change of pace. Like, I'm not going to say no to that. But that won't change the fundamental reason why we have so many of those types cropping up now. There's this general sense that things are not going well, and that they're just incrementally getting worse. So for the foreseeable future, I think you will actually just see a higher concentration of people like Morrow and nuisance streamers and things like that. I mean, you can see the civil unrest in places like England and all of that at the moment, but that I would rather people fight back than just completely give in. The alternative is just like let people make decisions for me at all times, and I just sort of like hide in my hole, and I emerge when the dust has settled. For that sort of approach for a citizenry is just tantamount to like, endorsed suicide. So Morrow is not completely bad, in my opinion. Just misguided.
And I think it's no, I agree. It's part of what makes her character compelling, despite the fact that it feels at the end of the book that she's gone into a cul-de-sac. It's a place that it's not going to affect meaningful change. I mean, I guess it's again, this is not any sort of novel observation that these forces tend towards atomization and people not forming the sorts of deep relationships that allow them to rely on one another. I mean, even relationships like family formation, like finding another person on whom you can rely, not just a succession of. I mean, they call them novel sexual encounters, but they tend to blur together if they're completely consequenceless and meaningless. Having children is a pretty good way to feel invested in the future, rather than just being a forever adolescent. These sorts of things you can really see Morrow has fallen prey to, is falling into traps of ultimately giving up on the future.
Yeah, and I don't want to spoil the ending necessarily for her character arc, but she does end up in a place where I tried to leave it up to the reader, essentially, for how you wanted to interpret this ultimate decision she makes. Is she completely, misguided, and, is she... Because there's really only one, stylistically, one capital letter in the entire book, and it comes right at the end. And it seems like she's resolute about something for the first time in her life. But you have to decide if this is just, the equivalent of a nuisance streamer, on steroids, or is this someone who's maybe finally getting some sort of inkling of sense about what she should do with her, all this sort of like nihilistic energy. So it's not in my case, I'm not going to give the answer to anyone because that just wouldn't be any fun. But you could go, depending on your own personal sort of reading of it and just how you feel about how to navigate these problems, you could go one way or the other, I would think.
Yeah, I think it was a good decision to leave it open. It's also kind of like, were you to just declare one way or the other for moral, I think it's be kind of missing the point of the rest of the book. It demands you to consider these things.
Yeah, and I mean, even for Femoid, you have a character who undergoes not a similar character arc. She's kind of off in her own world here, but I like when contemporary works can offer a glimmer of optimism now, because my God, I think we're really just tired of this like blanketed nihilism and resentment. It's just draining, right? So, but I think both kind of in different. I think Femoid is very clearly a bit more geared toward, what comes next and, healing and stuff, whereas Pound Flesh is kind of a bit more ambiguous morally and all that.
But I suspect the ever-present nihilism is really, it's coming from the same place as just non-stop irony. I mean, I know I keep hearing that millennial irony is now over, and we're entering a new age of sincerity, but there have been, I don't know, I feel like I've gone through so many so-called ages of sincerity, even just within my own lifetime, that only seem to be as ironic as the previous age that has been supposedly overcome. I mean, these all just seem to me to be of like childish or at best adolescent avoidance strategies. To say that, the nihilism, or at least the play nihilism, nothing matters. We're just pond scum on a rock floating in dead space.
Fuck! I hate those lines so much.
it just love is just a chemical reaction in your brain. The fact that the same chemical reaction in your brain is also that which tells you that this is but a chemical reaction is, for some reason not disqualifying in that case, but when it comes to anything positive, it's suddenly disqualifying because you're a deep and profound thinker. As you can tell, I don't have much time for this because I think it's trite and it's childish, and people who say these sort of things who are over the age of 20 just act their age. To me, it like these things, and the irony too, which I don't exempt myself from. I use this as a form of self-defense, I guess, as well. I mean, there are ways to avoid engaging in the world in any sort of constructive way. So it's very easy to offer commentary, and I appreciate the irony of that as someone who's doing a podcast. But offering commentary and just saying what is wrong rather than saying something constructive is easier, because when you offer something constructive, when you offer a potential course of action, you can be wrong. Like you can fail to have predicted something. You can offer advice or some map for what one might be able to do to solve a problem. That can just be incorrect, and you leave yourself open in that way and vulnerable. And so instead, it's just easier to say, well, nothing matters, and because of this philosophical insight I've arrived at, I can both never be wrong, and I can never venture anything that might be incorrect, and never be vulnerable in that way. So I regard the nihilism, the irony, and so on as more or less being symptomatic of the same thing.
It's just so passé at this point. I just
that's the worst part about it. It's just boring.
You're right. I just because I'm working on a new novel at the moment, as well as a poetry collection. I tend to do 2 projects at once, and without giving too much of this away, because I do feel it's the next sort of evolution here, and it's looking toward the future for my cohort, and even just the millennials and the Zoomers and all that sort of stuff together. But anyone from maybe the 18 to 35 group, this might be of particular interest. But I'm so I think I wake up every single day just pleased as punch that we are through the bulk of this just gay ass nihilistic era. It's just I'm just so fucking
Rick and Morty brand.
Oh yeah, that kind of stuff. I just couldn't stand it. Even when I was, a more, energetic and disaffected and manic type of young man, wannabe artist, where, I lived for extreme forms of expression. I hated it then, and I actually genuinely hate it even more now. Where,
but it's not an extreme form of expression. It's self anesthesia. It's there's just nothing extreme about it.
Right, and you can make that argument. And I've read Cioran and guys like that extensively, and I talk about them all the time because they hold a certain fascination still.
Yeah. Oh, this stuff is so far from Cioran. They're just doing two completely different things.
Yeah, they're doing a sort of avoidant strategy, as you've picked up on, where it's man, I'm not happy with the way things are in relation to this. Dude, we're just on a fucking rock, bro. Man, I could die tomorrow, and fucking I don't care, bro. Play Mambo number 5 at my funeral. It's shut the fuck up. Just take your life seriously, man.
But I think this is a good point of comparison. So you bringing up Emil Cioran's work. So yeah, I'm far from an expert on him, but my impression of his work is that it is ultimately quite a pessimistic. The work of a very pessimistic man, but it's the fruit of a genuine attempt to find some sort of meaning. He just really seemed to arrive at the conclusion that just the world, that our physical, the physical reality of being human is bewildering. One is born and it's a tragedy, and it's really for him almost it's transcendence or nothing. If one can transcend this spiritually through God, then that would fix everything. But he also didn't. He couldn't find it within himself to have that faith. So to me, his project felt very sincere. It felt like a sincere attempt to find meaning and to interrogate one's position in the world as something that is born. That has nothing to do with, maybe superficially, Rick and Mortyism as a philosophical movement, which to me is just it's just a cop out. It's the refusal to even begin to engage with the world.
Yeah, and I guess I mentioned Cioran and Femoid quite a bit, but I've read maybe 6 of his books, and I probably have 2 more that I have to get to. But my take on Cioran is somewhat similar to yours. I do like this idea, how you phrase it, as him sort of attempting to transcend, but then just really being disappointed in his inability to do that.
It's just everyone else's disappointment.
Right, and his personal journals are funny as hell, and there's that Philip Traylon guy on Substack. He routinely translates like untranslated sections, which I actually do appreciate reading, because Cioran is quite a funny and deeply poetic philosopher. Though my reading of his might not be as charitable as yours, where I see him.
You've read much more of him, so I mean, I'm inclined to defer to your judgment on this.
Sure, and I think especially if you focus on his aphorisms, which I tend to prefer to his longer works, there is this idea that he's almost just a deadpan comedian. Where if you watch his interviews and you just look at how he speaks about some of these things, you almost see him just deep down, internally, he's smiling just a little bit, that he can talk about literally enjoying nothing in his week, and it's all so bad, man, and truly no one could live like that.
And he didn't. So he apparently he had a very, very active social life. And he was constantly going out and engaging in life.
Right.
So he didn't live
He's friends with Beckett and all.
Yeah.
Right, and so Anathemas and Admirations, his last major work before he slipped into dementia, which, not to be glib, is probably what he foresaw in his future. That's the type of divine punishment that someone like Cioran would probably almost laugh at in seeing in other academics after spending a life of on hyper academic outputs. You just sorry, go ahead.
Oh no! I was just going to say maybe that is ultimately the evidence of God that he was looking for, that divine punishment, which he ironically was unable to appreciate. Having suffering from Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I mean, I say in the book, Cioran's the only philosopher that would probably be happy if you pissed on his grave, and I think he would have found something deeply delicious in being reduced to a state of dementia after an output like that his whole life. But I don't obviously wish dementia on anyone, but he was enough of a comedian in my mind that I think he really would have found some sort of sick pleasure in it. But so I see him as the logical end of Western nihilism. How far can you can't go any further than him. You just can't. If you read his books, I was looking for the most extreme philosophy that I could find. Mainlander, all these other guys, they don't really scratch that same itch. He's just putting it as plainly as he could over and over again. His whole career was just that. Man, my life is not that great, but I'm going to keep living it. That's just his whole thing. He's I like music and talking to Samuel Beckett, and that's about it.
I mean, I guess you can push nihilism much further than that, but it is silence.
It's just complete silence
committed anything
and
to the page, I think demonstrates at least some corner of your life that's not nihilistic.
Right, and so, I mean, short of, just saying nihilism is literally just emptiness and showing a visual representation of it, you have a guy like this who at least puts it into words as closely as you can get. And I'm just so glad we're past that. I'm really just, every single day I wake up thankful that we don't have that as the new driving force in the discourse, because there would be another however many decades of just waiting for it to be done with.
It was exhausting. It's the Rick and Mortyism, the Redditism present everywhere. Hopefully it's going away. We'll see what replaces it. If it's something more durable, or if it's something that is similarly that is only spectacle and no content. It's it's not something I really feel confident making any predictions about. I suppose in the West, just given the Christian history. Like a resurgence of Christianity is something I'd never rule out, but I don't really feel like I can make firm predictions about it.
Yeah, it depends where, if you see a mass checking out, or as logging off, I should say, you might get things like that. You might get a return to some sort of new age normalcy, some new normal in a non-weird sort of like Reddit-y way. And that'd be good enough for me. I don't think we can hope for much more.
Improvement.
I'll just take that and then, run with it. Though I guess in a darker prediction, you might see the nuisance streamers and that kind of new crush of miscreants and all of that, just sort of almost pushing that to its logical extreme. What is resentment? What is, this Nietzschean resentment in its extreme? That's what comes next. Like, just how bitter can you get about the state of the world? Just how bitter. We just need a new Cioran writing aphorisms about, not getting the right type of labubu and throwing like a fucking temper tantrum and hurting a local business owner.
I don't even think it would take that form. I think we already know the form it takes, which is filmed mass shootings. I think that is, like, they're not going to be writing aphorisms. I think we're already seeing someone filming them, so, like, wearing a GoPro, shooting up a liquor store or something, and then shooting themselves.
Right.
I think, like, we already do see the trajectory of nuisance streamers. I mean, what is more likely is there's just going to be there'll be a divergence of people depending on how they relate to nihilism and the death of God, which, whether one is consciously aware of it or not, is a painful position. I mean, Nietzsche seemed to regard it as a tragedy, or a real problem, rather than something necessarily to be celebrated. At least, I suppose for the few Ubermenschen among us, it might be something to be celebrated, but there aren't, far fewer people are Ubermenschen than people who think that they are, in fact, Supermen. It probably, you might just get a divergence of how one responds to the void, whether they become nuisance streamer, suicide bomber, or if they decide that normalcy is not a failure, but having a wife and 3 kids in a place in the suburbs is actually not so bad after all. That might be the two fates left open to Western men, not the two tendencies.
Right. Now, I hope most people find the latter, because I guess it might be wishful thinking for that type of extreme Cioran-esque like distillation of resentment culture to even find its way into written form in a compelling way, and that isn't just like some sort of ill-conceived attempt at it. I would hope for that, just from the art world side of things, just to see it, just so we can move past it. But because when you see people trying to do that, you know that what comes next is a fatigue with it. Once you've beheld it in its truest form, everything else just seems like a weak imitation of it after that. I would hope. So I don't know, this meta-modern era, I'm trying to wrestle with it myself for my next projects, where what does someone who's reformed look like out of this? Like really, you've spent like 10 years in the trenches, so to speak, and you decide you really just don't want to keep up with this stuff anymore, but you can't forget about all of that time. You just, for whatever reason, you can't quite move on. You feel like it has to have some sort of bearing on the rest of your existence. What does someone like that do? What does life look like for that type of person? So that's the focus of at least the novel, in some respects. And I don't know if I've seen too many people do that yet. Perhaps it's out there in the indie scene already, but I think that's exciting new meta-modern territory, as it were.
That is exciting. Yeah, the resurgence of the monastic lifestyle of former dopamine burnouts forming a seed.
Yeah.
That would be a very, very funny response to this. I don't think it'll happen, but I'd be all for it. We could,
that would be pretty
open
good.
the monasteries again.
I think, right? Yeah, and I don't know, like that sort of thing. I think for short stories, great content, even novels, poetry. It's a bit harder to get that into poetry form. I'm trying in some respects too, but I think the novel form or something with a more room for sort of emotionality is probably the better avenue, but I don't know.
I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come out with next. So, before we finish up, once again, you just tell people about your projects, where they can find them, and maybe, you know, if you want, you know, a place where people can reach out to you if they're interested.
Sure. Yeah. So I know we didn't necessarily get around to talking about it, but in terms of the first novel there, Femoid, that one, there is a physical still available out there, you know, somewhere, let's say. But I'm being sued over that book.
Oh, shit, that's right. I didn't mention that.
Yeah, we totally didn't talk about that.
Talking about the fact that you're being sued.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time by expressing my legal woes. But if any of the...
May as well, just brought it up.
Sure, all right. So I'll give you a little bit of it here. But I wrote this piece. I put it up on my Substack, and I linked it on my X, which is jceylon2. And, well, Femoid, as people who are familiar with my Jasper content and the Echolalia review, Poetry Ruse, and stuff like that, my equivalent, I guess, halfway of like a nuisance streamer effect in poetry. But I promise with higher-minded goals if you read that one. So the publisher, I put up this piece called The Curious Case of Calamari Archive and Why You Probably Shouldn't Sue Indie Writers, because the project was originally published with Calamari Archive. That's a matter of record. And they dropped the project after I told them that I wasn't actually a biracial femoid, I was me. And that an opportunity, a media opportunity, was presenting itself, and I could get the press some coverage there if they wanted. Optionally, they could be featured in the article, which was run by the Free Press, with a very sort of funny, damning headline. I still laugh at sometimes when I see it. I told my publisher there, D. White, let's say, that, I had also, with Femoid, tried to prove that you could use pen names for serious purposes as well, not just to, you know, play jokes on editors and stuff like that. And he, did not take that too well, despite the fact that, and this is also a matter of record, you can still check all these things. He's still got all this stuff up. They endorsed pseudonymous works, and you didn't need to actually tell them who you were. I would think as well the entire history of publishing would provide some sort of precedence for using pen names too, but he seemed to actually actively encourage the use of pen names, which was one of the reasons why I went with that press in case my real identity ever came out. And we hadn't signed to any sort of formal contract. It was just sort of like a spit shake type deal over email, as some indie publishers like to do. So I don't necessarily begrudge a publisher not wanting to associate with literary pranksters or anything like that. You know, I'm not here to force my work on any publisher, and if they sort of get cold feet or something, like whatever, you know, in that case, you know, just don't purport to champion, you know, artistic freedom, blah, 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 if you're really not about that, is my only point. So I thought, because I hadn't signed any deal, and because his press openly stated as well that they didn't even want first rights to the book technically, that I could get it republished with the publisher for Pound Flesh, McBussy Publishing there. The lovingly named McBussy Publishing. Check them out on YouTube, by the way. They've got a funny YouTube channel and all that. But and they've got some books coming out too that are going to be great. But yeah, so I thought, well, I own the book now. It's unfortunate that he dropped me and that he kind of turned people in the industry against me, whom I can't name here because anytime I even hint at them, they email me threatening to sue me. Which is, by the way, you know, some of these, I just want to make a point here. Some of these people, at least one, let's say, not going to name who he is, I told him that I was a guy after he allegedly endorsed the book, and he told me it didn't matter. And then he did a complete 180 on me and threatened to sue me. So, you know, I'm not sure a lot of people who like champion indie writers and, you know, freedom of speech and all that stuff in this industry actually mean it. In fact, my experience has been the exact opposite. And I've tried to, in my dealings with all of these people, be as cordial as possible. And I've offered to talk to them about all of these things over video chat or anything that they would want me to do, presumably to smooth things over, but they just send me long meandering emails and talk to me about very weird things and just accuse me of all sorts of things. So it's neither here nor there. But anyway, I tried to get this republished or distributed through McBussy, and it worked for a little while, and you know, you're selling some copies and whatever. And then, yeah, he got hit with a cease and desist from a lawyer with a... I mean, if you looked this guy up, you would think, well, this fella has a checked past, you know, he's a checkered sort of reputation. But there's a lawyer all the same associated with us that I can't name. So it was an actual...
Like, presumably this isn't over incredible amounts of money that people are lawyering up for you. Not to impugn Femoid, but, you know, right. I'm not assuming that, you know, they're lawyering up to get millions of dollars out of this.
Right, like, absolutely not. I mean, I make the case in my Curious Case of Calamari archive piece that, you know, if you try to sue an indie writer over a book like Femoid or, you know, something else, you're suing us over proverbial peanuts a lot of the time, like a few $100, maybe a few thousand or something at the most, typically because royalties are not very good. And it's really like you're paying more for the legal process than you are that you. And yeah, I don't care about the money. I would just give him I don't give a shit. I'll give him all the royalties if he wants, allegedly. But, you know, here's a press that actually genuinely advocates for the free dissemination of work openly on their manifesto. And that they shouldn't, you know, in any way hinder a creative's ability to spread their work. So as a bit of an act of defiance, I included a free link to the digital PDF of Femoid in that article there. And you can find it on my link tree on my socials and stuff and on Substack. Because Femoid was never about making money, although I did promise the person that I wrote it about that I would give her as much of it as I could. That was always my promise to her so that she could live better. And I still do mean that. but yeah, these types of indie books, you aren't going to make a ton off of them. So maybe that was wishful thinking, but I just, yeah, I really, really think that presses of that kind of stature that have been around for 20 plus years and have published like really great writers are just doing themselves a grave disservice in cases like these. Like, it's horrible publicity, and I really tried to encourage them in my own way to not go through with this, just because you're undermining 20 plus years of work here for me, for like one novel. And I don't know, I kind of want to wash my hands of the whole thing. I can't say where it will go, but yeah, so Femoid technically in the PDF form, free at the moment. You can find the sort of colored PDF. I updated it with a new afterword. So I guess, if you want to participate in the dissemination of a threatened book, you can go ahead and download that and do literally whatever the fuck you want with it. I don't care. Read it as a curiosity.
Yeah, sometimes when people come on here, they'll do an Amazon promotion. You can get their ebook for 99 cents, but this is one better. This is a very special promotion, a promotional distribution.
Straight up, yeah. Like, if you want to buy a physical while it's around, like, by all means, it's you can find it if you look for it. But this is my sort of I guess declaration of rebellion here, because that's exactly what his press encourages. He almost says word for word that you should be able to pirate things that you like. So in a sense, I've pirated my own book almost. I'm not really sure, but his claims to have
proud tradition. There is a proud tradition of people doing that to allegedly spite their former publishers.
Yeah, and it's very liberating, because I think a lot of people would back down in this case, or they just try to sort of like move on to the next phase of their career. And maybe it's the rebellious spirit in me, but I don't think that you should let industry fixtures like this publisher kind of get away with this stuff in this era. Like, there's so much working against indie artists, like just margins, all that sort of stuff. Like, this is where you define your career. I mean, is it going to be the best book that I've ever written or like will ever write? Probably not. Like, I love it. It's weird. It's different. It has a lot of sentimental value. It has its moments with all the different styles and weirdness and stuff like that. Like, it has charm. And I'll stand by it for the rest of my career for what it is. So you can check that out. You can do whatever you like with that through those PDF links. But then I'll update you on what goes on with that soon, because I actually genuinely don't fucking know. Like, I could wake up and be served tomorrow or some stupid shit over nothing, essentially. But I don't care. I don't fear it. It's just what it is at this point. Like, I'll go represent myself in court if I have to. But you wouldn't even pay a fucking lawyer over this. Like,
just the idea that you're going to pay a lawyer to chase up a book whose sales, if you made them back, I doubt it's going to cover the legal costs.
Right, probably not.
It's look, obviously it's not financially motivated. It's motivated by, I don't know, the demand for recognition or something. It's whatever's going on in the claimant's head.
Well, I'm not going to disparage him here. Just as the final thing I'll say on it, like, I've tried to be very polite when speaking about the matter in interviews and things like that, because I do actually regard the publisher as a good editor, even though, at times he might have introduced typos and stuff like that into the manuscript or whatever. But, I had a good experience working with him, and he did teach me a decent amount about the novel form and all of that, and he had really cool stories and whatever else. So when he said that none of that was real, and, he accused me of having made up my ex-girlfriend and all this sort of other stuff, I was actually kind of disappointed, because I did enjoy my working relationship with him. He was a little bit, I can't say, but I got the sense that he might do something like this to other people, if they ever presented him with the opportunity. But I chose to believe that a press that advocated for artistic freedom and anonymity and all of this sort of stuff could actually uphold those tenets and responsibly end a relationship with a creative that they, I guess, just didn't agree with or see eye to eye with, but they couldn't, evidently, which is just massively disappointing, I guess. And I don't want indie authors to feel like imperiled at all times and like they can't express the exact things that these presses claim to want from them, right? It's a weird bait and switch. They say, I use this example a lot. They say, "Oh, give us stuff written in blood," and all that sort of lame ass stuff from the fucking like pseudo Nietzschean stuff. But they hate Nietzsche, so like I don't know why they still use it. But they offer that, and then they're scared of anything red.
Yeah, they'll tell you to give birth to a dancing star or something like that in the next breath. Talk about how much I hate Nietzsche. That kind of place. Yeah.
Right. It's the height of lunacy, and in this case, hypocrisy, unfortunately. So, I've had to deal with a lot of weird stuff behind the scenes and like indirect contact and people sending me long meandering emails telling me I'm a horrible person and all this sort of shit. And like, it's I'm not going to say it's vaguely harassing. I don't care. Like, you can send me 100 emails like that. It really doesn't change the fundamental purpose of the book, to me anyway. And it doesn't change the fact that I should be able to show the world what we came up with in the end. So that's that. You can read Femoid for free. But then Poundflesh is on ye old McBussy's website, and they're expanding distribution soon, so it'll be available through like other online retailers and all that good stuff. And Echo's still on Amazon for the poetry stuff.
Beautiful. And thanks again for coming on. You've become a bit of a fixture here. It's like when you publish something next, I have an invitation to jump on. Or if you just come across more poetry, if Megan Fox releases a new collection, naturally we'll have to come.
Oh yeah. I was at the bookstore the other day. I saw some more celebrity poetry. Oh, Matthew McConaughey's new quasi poetry collection. Holy shit! I don't know if you haven't. Yeah, you gotta check out Matthew's latest cogitations here. They're they're looking juicy. They're looking promising.
It's a look. I won't criticize his work without having read it, but I just my heart sinks whenever I get the impression that someone writes poetry because they think it's easy, because it's short. That's the overwhelming impression I get from all celebrity poems, really.
More or less.
Maybe there'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Maybe.
It would be...
foreclose that possibility.
Maybe Charlie XCX or whatever will come out with something, revolutionary here. Who knows? But I think we should just create like a betting pool on who's actually going to do it. Like take like 20 names.
Who's the first
of
good
people
celebrity poet? Who will it be?
Like who even appears moderately literate? and then just, create some sort of pool. Like maybe it's Zendaya, maybe it's Tom Holland, maybe it's fucking Woody Harrelson. I don't know.
I think it'll be Tekashi 6ix9ine's comeback.
Dude, actually,
it'll be him.
Fuck yeah, I love it. His stuff. If you're looking for resentful music.
Yeah, I think his poetry readings would be very good. You just imagine him in like readings Carlton screaming at the crowd.
That would genuinely be so sick. I got
bewildered middle-aged people.
Well, if you read his lyrics, I'm not going to say they're poetic. They're like troglodytic, but
yeah,
in the most amusing way. I love it.
Yeah, it reminds. Oh fuck! What's his name? The Gucci Gang guy. It was from a while ago.
Lil Pump. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he could. He's another man with a very functional approach to onomatopoeic approach to poetry. I feel like his artistry is, when you repeat a word enough and it starts to feel very strange. That's his entire artistic career. Did he release a song about how much he likes Donald Trump, actually? I swear
he did.
Yeah. I think he could be. My bet's on him. Lil Pump. He's going to be the first celebrity to release a good poetry collection.
All right, you're taking Lil Pump. I like Tekashi 6ix9ine. He's on he's having like a career renaissance, hitting up podcasts and stuff like that. I think if I were to reach out to his team,
I should get him on. I should get him on the show.
Yeah.
Really good fit.
Do it, yeah. And maybe he wants to talk about a couple of the books he's like accidentally read over the years.
Been waiting for a Finnegan's Wake episode, and I think he's just the man. I want him. Open the episode with him screaming "River Run" past Adam and Eve. His inimitable voice.
That would go unreasonably hard.
Yeah,
I want that.
That's how he can revive his musical career.
That's so sick. I'm gonna contact his team.
So thanks for coming on. That was good fun. It's always fun having you on the show. And
thanks a ton.
Yeah, for everyone listening, check out Aaron's books. I like both of them, but like I said, I've recommended Pound Flesh to a few people in real life.
Sick.
Yeah. It's also like it's an easy recommendation because it's so short. It's like you're not asking someone to, you're not handing someone a doorstop of a book and saying, go at it. It's links to everything will be in the show notes. And thanks for listening. See you next time.